Today, as we gather at the 10th anniversary of the Radiant Wellness Conclave to celebrate a decade of this wellness initiative and to commemorate really, I think, the 8th time we're all getting together because 2 years were lost to COVID and you had to do it virtually. This is in many ways a reminder, and we heard it already in Colonel David's remarks, especially the ones that ChatGPT hadn't written, that wellness goes just beyond trends, beyond not being ill. One of the things he's built up, and he and Renuka David have built up in this conclave, is the conviction to bring clarity and to act as a mirror for all of us, reflecting in many ways on the shifting needs, values, and challenges facing us all in our society in the quest for wellness. I think it's Dr. Renuka David who's curated this year's conclave, so thank you, Renuka, for bringing me back again. I will say that when I first came here very early on in the series of conclaves, it had all been started with a fairly quiet intention, a couple of hundred people seeking connection and healing. But I gathered that the story had begun much earlier, 10 years earlier in 2005, when your Radiant Medical Services conducted wellness workshops in schools, colleges, and offices. So now you're bringing together thought leaders, scientists, practitioners, artists, celebrities, everyday individuals to ask one essential question: what does it truly mean to be well? Now, although we are here in a celebratory mood to celebrate 10 years of this initiative, we can't allow this moment of hard fought for success to eclipse this issue that they have labeled at the head of today's gathering, an era of disruption. A torrent of digital marvels that enthrall and ensnare us in equal measure. Never before have we had such potent tools to enhance life, and yet never have so many aspects of our well-being seemed under siege. In fact, the wellness idea, I think it came from an American university, the Ohio State University, that defined wellness for the first time in 9 dimensions, and this conclave has picked them up: physical, emotional, intellectual, spiritual, social, environmental, occupational, financial, and cultural. So there are 9 parameters, and each of them, really, you need to be well in each of these categories to optimize your overall well-being. And of course, across each of these 9, this 21st century period of technological disruption is cutting a swathe through all aspects of wellness. And that's what I'm going to try and talk to you all about today. Just to set the tone, because there are going to be experts talking on each of these categories in the course of the day, and I'm looking forward to hearing most of them myself. The first aspect of wellness is perhaps something that I myself am not doing enough about. I rarely have the time to upkeep amongst the various demands on my time, and that's physical wellness. In the physical realm today, our machines have rendered toil nearly obsolete. Our bodies have become sedentary. In an age where groceries arrive in 10 minutes at the click of a screen, cars park themselves, and remote controls have even turned off mere physical exercise to get up and change the channel on the TV, our natural motions are reduced essentially to the click of a finger. I think this is the digit that gets the most exercise for most of us. In the big metropolitan cities like Mumbai, Delhi, and Bangalore, and today, even in many smaller towns, the modern conveniences like app-based food delivery, ride-hailing, air-conditioned offices have made movement merely an option. As a result, India today has the world's second largest number of adults with diabetes, over 77 million, and the prevalence of obesity has more than doubled since 2000, especially amongst our urban youth. Research also shows that as internet and smartphone use rise, leisure time physical activity plunges, a pattern that in turn is linked to obesity. This problem isn't just national. In fact, The fraction of US adults who are overweight or obese has also soared from under 50% in the 1960s to over 80% today. India, I'm afraid, is following, therefore, a well-established global pattern. And though we have all these guidelines telling us that even just 150 minutes, 2.5 hours of exercise per week, moderate exercise, which you can do basically in about 20 minutes a day, will achieve some 75% of your risk reduction for all causes of mortality. Even then, screen time tends to leave most of us short of that goal. From doomed fad diets to over-caffeinated energy drinks to poor posture, peering at tiny screens, our devices have really enticed us into a health epidemic. Meanwhile, blue screens bleep in our bedrooms, delaying sleep and robbing us of restorative rest. In short, the gadgets designed to save us labor have, without our noticing, worn down our bodies. Yet the prescription is simple: move more. Yet, I do understand, because I have a fast-paced life myself, I do understand it's easier said than done. And especially once you get to a certain position in India where people are willing to help you. I'm guilty of ringing the bell for a cup of chai rather than getting up and getting it myself. And we are all very often finding ourselves in that position. The prescription, of course, has to be a little more nuanced. It has to be that we must strive to include physical wellness in our daily lives. If you can't go on a prescribed run or whatever, but you're on the phone all the time for work, well, instead of taking a call seated, walk up and down while talking on the phone. Give up your caffeinated and sugary energy drinks and replace them with, I don't know, green tea, matcha tea, or whatever. Or choose to walk out and buy yourself a packet of almond milk or something instead of turning to instant delivery apps. The devil's always in the details. And I know it's easier to preach than to practice all this, but it's worth saying to all of you. Now, wellness, of course, isn't just corporeal, and that brings us to the second kind of wellness, which is emotional. Today, step into the glow of a smartphone at midnight, and you will glimpse a new malady: emotional unrest and unwellness. There's an anthropologist in America, Jean Twenge, who has documented an epidemic of anxiety and depression amongst teens and young adults in the 2010s, coinciding with the rise of digital media. Today's youth, the so-called Gen Z as they're called, report sharp increases in loneliness, self-harm, suicidal thoughts, a phenomenon that unfortunately trembles hand in hand with hours spent scrolling through your screens and your apps. How does this happen? Because social media, for all its promise of connection, often actually yields disconnection. Many studies have found that more screen time correlates with worse mental health. The more young people visit social platforms each week, the higher their risk of depression and anxiety. Negative social comparisons, for example, online rejection, cyberbullying, all of these are adding salt to their wounds, and night after night of swipe and swipe starves them of real face-to-face comfort. This has actually given rise to an epidemic of loneliness, a phenomenon that even arose before the pandemic. And once the pandemic shut our doors, of course, it got even worse. I'm not sure that that generation has fully recovered from it. I've read somewhere, and there are doctors in the room who can correct me, that loneliness is as lethal as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. In short, our devices are displacing real human contact. We have thousands of so-called friends tagged on our social media sites and our photos, and yet so many of us find no shoulder to rest their heads on, nor strong arms to fall back upon in need. It is the cruel paradox of the digital era that the width of our connections has grown, but the depth has shrunk. Now, history often repeats itself in cases like this. When globalization first sank in properly, we were quick to realize this phenomenon brought us both closer together and tore us apart. As we sit today at our dining tables or drawing rooms, basking in the privileges we take for granted and the forces of globalization, which we can see on our smartphone social media applications, provide us snippets of information and glimpses of events from all corners of the world. Of course, sometimes it's bleakness, Gaza, Ukraine, horrors like that. But often the snippets, endless and graphic and diverting, might induce in us a loathing for what is happening in the world around us, a loathing that soon begins to border on indifference, until we cease to care what's happening, so long as our well-being is not vitiated. But in fact, that is also part of what's happening to our mental health. Because when we become indifferent to the experiences and sufferings of others because of oversaturation, when we become more selfish and self-centered, both as people and societies, we actually find ourselves suffering and enduring far worse in terms of our mental well-being than in the days when we actually related to people we met and saw and dealt with and lived amongst and grew up with. Now, this entire phenomenon hasn't spared the third area of wellness, our intellect, which stands also fractured today by technology. Research shows that even the mere presence of a smartphone saps our focus. There's actually experiments conducted, by the way, I'm not joking, that when two students of equal academic merit were given the same exercise in different rooms, one sitting at the same desk as the other one, but this person had a mobile phone on his desk. He wasn't looking at the mobile phone, he wasn't allowed to look, but it was on his desk. The mere presence of the phone served as a distraction and diminished the performance on the test. Just the presence of the phone. And these are scientific studies observed by scholars, psychoanalysts, and so on. So there is, of course, the worsening of attention, the sort of fragmentation of attention that pervades our daily lives. And on top of that, we, instead of savoring long, complex reading like a book, or even a lengthy, patient conversation, many of us are skimming headlines, flitting across tablets or mobile phones like digital butterflies. Our increasingly short attention spans are not an accident because they are actually the expected outcome of our gadgets and our gadget-focused lives. In effect, our devices have become cognitive crutches. When we forget facts, Google remembers them for us. Forget a quote, don't have to tax your own memory. Remember a fragment of what you're looking for, you'll find it on your mobile phone. And these crutches are not necessarily bad, but what is bad is depending solely on them. Whenever I give somebody's number off by heart to somebody else, they're astonished. They say, you actually know the number? It's not your number? I said, yes, because I dial it often enough. But no, actually, I don't really dial it. I press his name on the screen with his number on it. But it so happens that there's something musical about his number that I was able to recall, and now I can recite it to all sorts of people looking to reach me. Now, these are simple tasks, but they're so essential for our minds. The siren song of quick trivia actually deprives us of the ability not just to remember, but to concentrate. And that's what underpins our creativity. I know that the young people say, oh, this is the boomer generation and so on. But it's true that things were different in the pre-digital era. When I grew up in India in the late 50s, early 60s, there was obviously no television. There certainly, no inventor had dreamt up Nintendo or PlayStation. And of course, mobile phones and laptops didn't exist. So what could you do? And I was an asthmatic child, so I couldn't always go out and play with my friends. You read, I read, and reading made me. I mean, so many ways. Every one of the qualities that today people claim to like or admire or respect in me were qualities acquired as a tiny asthmatic child, unable to sleep, barely able to breathe, sitting up in bed, big eyes, nothing to do but read. And that reading, that widespread, indiscriminate reading, and obviously my own books I finished very quickly, so my parents' books, which I was not old enough to understand, but I'd read them anyway because that's all there was available to me. And through them, I acquired ideas, thoughts, knowledge of the world, curiosity, and vocabulary, because when you come across the same word in 3 different books in 3 different contexts, you'll understand the meaning and the nuance. You won't have to mug up dictionaries. So I just wanted to say to you that that pleasure that I grew up with coming out of books, I'm very grateful that not only have I been able to impart that to my children, but I see they have been able to do it to their children. And when I see today a tiny tot of 4 years old reading a book or trying to read a book in the morning, instead of just simply mindlessly switching on a screen, I breathe a sigh of relief. But sadly, I'm increasingly aware how much of an exception my own children and grandchildren are. Today, you don't really pick up a book anymore to be informed about something. You Google it, or you go on some AI program and ask it to summarize the issue for you. Now, there is an argument for that. Increasingly, the demands on our time, the amount of communication, information we all have to digest, has grown so much that you do want someone to do the pre-chewing, the pre-digesting for you. But just as you wouldn't want anyone to pre-chew your food before putting it in your mouth, do you really want somebody else's pre-digested stuff entering your brain? Would you not rather train your brain to figure out for itself, from the information it reads, what it thinks about something, rather than having that somebody else's or a computer algorithm's thinking force-fed into you? I mention this quite simply because, of course, reading on screen has become so much the default mode that in many ways, reading a book almost feels like a protest or an act of rebellion. Physical forms of literature are simply now passé for too many. Now, there have been, again, studies. I've written about one of them in my book, A Wonderland of Words, as to how this actually affects our intellectual wellness. Our brains alter if we don't do complex reading. And there is a worrying and alarming series of studies that demonstrate that actually, from one generation to the next, there have actually been changes in people's intellectual capacities. It's very worrying. It's not entirely accidental that the Oxford Word of the Year for 2024 was brain rot. And there's so much of it about. And I do want to say, when parents don't insist on their children reading, they're doing their children a disservice. If they themselves set an example by reading, the children will want to emulate them. Too many parents are not setting that example. And then too many children. I mean, I remember a young mother coming to me and saying, oh, my son doesn't like to read. Once he puts away his school books, he never opens another book ever. And I said, so what does he enjoy doing? And she said, football. I said, get him a book on football. Let him find out when it's raining or whatever and he can't go out and play or it's too dark, whatever it may be. Let him read about the football heroes of the past. Let him read accounts of matches he's never seen, of footballing heroes who are in the legend, lost in the midst of legend. The subject he interests him can be anything. There are books available on everything, but engaging with the book is good for him anyway. Anyway, I don't know if she succeeded. I suspect she didn't. But the fact is that the truth is that this is a very important aspect of wellness. Let me turn to the fourth one, the spiritual wellness issue, the search for meaning, purpose, and connection to something larger than ourselves. That's a very normal human aspiration. In today's unrest, we expect instant gratification, but we dodge quiet contemplation. Prayer and meditation are often abandoned, not necessarily in protest or rejection, but just by accident. An email pings in the middle of a silence, and our moment of pondering disappears. We avail ourselves of guided spirituality via apps, but usually only in 1 or 2 minute bites. We don't have the patience to listen to an entire long lecture. We find that digital natives, the generation of tech-addled youth, are losing as a result the capacity for empathy, the very foundation of humanity. When did we last sit with a difficult thought until it was resolved in our minds without turning to, I don't know, WikiHow, the problem away? Now we swipe it aside. We're like the biblical Elijah on the mountain. We hear the wind, the earthquake, the fire, but in our case, there are notifications, emails, and news cycles, and we fail to hear the still, small voice of inner truth. The irony is tragic. Technology was invented in part to expand the mind, yet it now threatens to shrink our souls. Without intentional discipline, we risk floating adrift spiritually in a sea of quick fixes and hollow hits. The dopamine might come, but where in all that is our real mind, our heart, our soul? Next one is social wellness. In a sense, it connects to some of the things I've already been talking about. If I have 500 friends on a profile, that's impressive, but does that mean we have them off screen too? The charts are clear. More virtual friends often mean fewer real ones. We may update our status 50 times a day, but decline a lunch invitation. Offline friendships take work and effort. A phone doesn't hug you at midnight when you're in crisis. Spend more time on media platforms, but then you are actually replacing time you would spend in person. One survey of adolescents concluded that those who report heavy social media and screen use were significantly more prone to depression and suicide. We talked about mental wellness. Social wellness is part of this. We actually have created a high-tech version of that well-known paradox called mending wall. Our interconnected fences feel closer, yet our neighbors might well be miles away. This brings us to one conclusion. The very tools meant to connect us, are they really entrenching divisions between us? Social feeds are tailored to our preferences, allegedly, by inscrutable algorithms. If you watch a particular kind of reel, the system will keep feeding you that kind of reel. The result is you're in a digital echo chamber, a filter bubble, hearing only what aligns with your views or what you've already been interested in looking for anyway. A single tweet or post can spark outrage globally, but genuine dialogue with whatever provoked that is rare. An innocuous comment can instantly draw a mob of anonymous critics. Online platforms can both inflate our sense of community and weaponize it, just as easily forging bonds as fueling cancellations. No wonder many feel what the French call anomie. We are actually bound together through social media and yet isolated. And that leads me to the next aspect of wellness, the environmental. Because you go off on the terrace, turn off the lights, and what you see, if actually you see a sky twinkling with stars, then you're in the right city, because certainly in the city I now live in most of the time, Delhi, that's no longer an option. You don't see the sky, you don't see the stars. Air pollution, light pollution in the big cities, the excessive, misdirected, and disruptive presence of artificial light in the night environment. All of these things are beginning to change the world's nocturnal ecosystem, and as a result, of course, even our sense of wellness. If we look out the window, what do we see? Perhaps smoky factory stacks in some places. There might be, of course, skyscraping, enormous buildings and data centers, etc. But nature is elusive, has to be looked for and found. Artificial intelligence is embedded in everyday technology, from voice assistants like Alexa and Siri, to AI-powered apps for education, entertainment, as the Colonel reminded us, even for writing bits of speeches. All of this has begun pervading all our lives, and they recommend recipes. They apparently are actually giving therapy. People are consulting an AI program the way they might have consulted an elder or a wiser or even a doctor when they are in need of some sort of emotional counseling. And all of this is also affecting the environment, because behind each of these lies power plants, diesel backup generators. Our gadget obsession has also resulted in mountains of discarded electronics. We produce over 60 million tons of electronic waste every year, a staggering amount of toxic trash. Phones, laptops, cables, often shipped overseas and crudely dismantled in low-income communities, in which lead, mercury, and other poisons are leaching into the soil and water, harming the vulnerable. Committees have called the situation an e-waste tsunami, which threatens the world's ecology. We are not doing anything about it. We're making newer and smarter smartphones. We are changing plugs and styles and creating more and more reasons to throw away what we had before and generate even more waste. Every smartphone mined, the clamshell, the hard shell of the smartphone, is actually using rare metals, rare earths, which strip the earth and emit carbon. Every obsolete printer dumped in a landfill is actually indirectly threatening wildlife. Our digitally saturated lives are accelerating climate change and squandering the Earth's finite resources. We are, in the name of progress, undermining the very planet that sustains us. And as we know, the planet is already deteriorating. I don't need to tell anybody from Gen Z about that. You've been raised on the climate clock. You know your time is running out. There is apparently a global phenomenon called eco-anxiety, denoting a chronic fear of environmental doom. We in India will soon see glaciers melting, forests burning. We'll have heat waves and sadly deaths from heat waves. All of these are ecological disasters exacerbated by our modern trends, including growing e-waste. And our cities certainly will provide no solace because they simply don't offer what nature does, but nature is narrowing and we are encroaching upon it more and more. Next comes occupational wellness, our working lives, which have been upended. The cubicles of the 20th century gave way to laptops and remote connections. Now the office comes home with us. The boundaries between work and home are blurred more than ever. 9 to 5 became 24/7 connectivity. Nearly 41% of remote workers report high stress, which is double the level of office workers, even in the days of very demanding offices. Our colleagues are no longer just at the next desk. They're at the gym meet at midnight. 82% of tech workers are reporting feeling burned out from constant connectivity. Most, of course, in tech are logging longer hours than their office-bound peers. Zoom fatigue is now a term. Email anxiety is another term. The new dimensions of the workplace mean even the people who are out there moving on little bikes, delivering things to you, suffer from what's called the gig economy's precarity or precariousness. When an email can arrive at any hour with an obligation to answer as soon as possible, vacations become cursory. We are forced to become unpaid IT support for home Wi-Fi. There's a hustle culture now in which techies are logging 60 to 80-hour weeks. There was a 2024 report, Work-Life Balance Index, that rates India 120th out of 130 countries studied because of the shocking demands we make at the workplace. I must say, I remember when I got involved with the tragic death of a young woman from Kerala who passed away while working at Ernst & Young in Pune, Anna Sebastian. Her death was a result directly of extreme work pressure, toxic work environment. She would stagger home well after midnight at the end of a very long day, only to receive a call from her boss demanding a report by 6 a.m. the next morning, night after night. And somebody who had actually been in perfect health passed away as a result of this kind of pressure. I've actually even promoted the idea of some remedial legislation on this. I've given it to the government, urged them to consider it. I've introduced a private member's bill, because I do believe that balancing between work and the employee's personal life is extremely important for occupational wellness. I might add that even in the relatively privileged position of a member of parliament, I am no longer able to cope with the demands of the number of people communicating with me. You know, I carry this blessed thing, but I have to tell you that as of this morning, I have 1,800 unopened conversations on WhatsApp. And each conversation, some of them may have 150 messages that I haven't had a chance to check for the last several months. I go to my email, and in the Google algorithm of the important and unread, there are 34,500 unread emails. It is simply not possible for a human being to cope. I work 18-hour days, sometimes longer, and if I'm not able to cope, and my staff, my assistants can't do very much better either, I must admit. I haven't really taken a proper holiday, except in connection with a conference, taking a few extra hours to go and do something else. But just a holiday as a holiday, I don't know when that was, certainly not for the last 20 years at least. So I mention occupational wellness because it affects us all. Whether you're a member of parliament, whether you're a new recruit in a company, this is the extraordinary challenge we face. And at the same time, we can't just kick back and say, we'd like more work-life balance, please, because we're living in an era where the stress of work is being complemented by the stress of losing work, thanks to automation, thanks to robots coming in, thanks to AI programs replacing us. Algorithms can replace cashiers. 3D printers will replace artisans and workers. According to Microsoft researchers, AI will soon take over all the jobs of translators, historians, and writers. Now, I'm not feeling terribly threatened myself just yet, even though I'm an amateur historian. I hope will exit this vale of tears known for my writings. Nonetheless, I'm really concerned for the next few generations. Will we read anything that human beings have actually spent their individual consciousness devoting themselves to? When we risk losing our jobs in a blink or in a firm wave update, then our professional identity, which is a key part of our wellness, suffers. The promise of leisure through machines has also turned into reality of more work for many and the fear of losing work to others. So stress and insecurity instead of your workplace being a source of pride and self-worth, that's, again, a price of our era of disruption. Financial wellness. Well, there is, of course, increased concern about that. Online shopping and fintech have turned consumption into a click. Services like buy now, pay later have actually led you to split purchases into installments. Debts are rising. I don't think I have current figures for Indians yet, but in America it is said that Americans are even taking loans for groceries. The result is that there is a debt trap for everybody. And more and more people are missing their debt payments, adding to their stress and misery. Social media is bombarding us with targeted ads and influencer hype, nudging us to buy more, splurge on the latest gadgets and lifestyle kitsch. And there's all these other crypto stock trading apps and so on, luring you with the prospect of overnight riches, which then unfortunately end up in crashes, leaving you depressed and broke. So aspirations become insecurities, and the technologies that track our spending and offer instant loans shackle very many to overconsumption and debt. Financial wellness, therefore, is extremely difficult. What we need to be well in that aspect is financial agency, which we're losing. Finally, we must consider cultural wellness, that shared sense of identity and meaning that gives us all roots. Globalization, which has been turbocharged by tech, has nonetheless woven cultures together like never before, and we can learn foreign languages via an app. We can watch K-pop going viral on another app. We can essentially feel homogenized by the process of all this seamless spreading of culture. But the result is, again, a loss of authenticity, a loss of being rooted in your culture. Children in Delhi may prefer Batman to Ramayan, K-dramas to Bollywood. A cafe in Paris may play Japanese pop rather than Edith Piaf. And this homogenization is affecting our sense of culture, of cultural authenticity, of what is cultivated in the quiet in your own society around you, because culture includes essentially what we value around us in our societies. But now instead, all we value are trends which have swept through and transformed us. The algorithm has replaced heritage. Everything from opinions to cultural archetypes and even originality comes through cultural feedback, comes on an AI program. And so we have example after example of how this homogenization of culture in this era of disruption is beginning to fundamentally affect our priceless traditions, our local festivals, native languages, local handicrafts, all languishing unsung. And social media can even fracture cultures, because once harmonious societies are quarreling on common threads, eroding the goodwill of shared narratives. So, let me try and wrap this up, because like Egyptian mummies, we're all strapped for time. We can reclaim our wellness from the jaws of disruption. We don't have to renounce technology. It's come to stay. There are good things in it. But we can domesticate it. We can make it ours. The first step is awareness. Remember that we can pilot our technologies rather than be chained to them. The second is choice. Opt for those aspects of digital life that enhance our wellness: telemedicine, educational media, supportive online communities. Opt out of those that erode our wellness: mindless scrolling, toxic apps, needless gadget upgrades. And finally, of course, practice healthy habits. And the more natural that practice becomes, the more our institutions will adapt to us, to our values, and our wellness will improve. So let me end by saying to all of you, I hope that in this young and aspirational nation, I see a lot of young students there at the back, we will all be able to ride this wave of disruption, that we will understand the challenges facing us, the ones I have tried to describe to you today, and remember that we can use all of these to reinforce each other. Our physical health can be supported by financial security. Emotional weakness can be addressed by having strong social bonds. Holistic well-being is possible. That means attending to body, mind, work, community, values, and surroundings altogether. Wellness at the individual level can be matched by a society that prioritizes well-being at large. And to my mind, if we can develop all of these dimensions, we can have a shared dream, a shared vision that will, in fact, transform us all into individuals who can truly rejoice in our wellness. Have a wonderful conference today. I'll be back for a later session, but meanwhile, all the very best to all of you. Jai Hind.
Can we have a big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for Dr. Tharoor, and requesting Colonel David Sahayam and Dr. Renuka to please join me on stage to do the honors and present Dr. Tharoor with a special memento to commemorate this occasion.
Put this down and that's it for now.
Yeah, sure. So you spoke on all the 9 dimensions.